Welcome to the Beyond Jiu Jitsu podcast, episode number 55. Today, we are talking all about submissions, the top 5 submissions that you must know as a white belt to succeed.
Yeah, there's lots, but I think we've narrowed it down to 5, what I think are 5 crucial submissions that every white belt should know and have a good understanding of. And we're going to go over what they are and why, more importantly, why. It's all about the why.
Yeah.
Why they're the important submissions.
And hopefully we're going to take a little trip down a different path we haven't really explored before on the show and try to explain a little bit of technique via the powers of audio. But we shall see how that turns out.
Yeah, I think we're going to essentially just pop a tab of acid each and just go for it.
Yeah. You've been listening to Joe Rogan. I knew it. I knew you would come around.
Yeah,
but just for a bit of housekeeping, if this is your first episode, welcome to the podcast. I'm Kieren Lefebvre. I am a blue belt under the great and powerful Adam Childs, who's sitting across from me, a black belt, owner, operator of Alliance Sydney Jiu Jitsu.
That's right. That's me. If it is your first episode, thanks for tuning in. Feel free to follow our Instagram, be a Patreon. That's always cool.
Yes. But, speaking of.
Yeah, little segue. Kieren, we got some news going on before we jump into the episode.
We do. Big announcement on episode 55 here today. You're hearing it first. We have a competition, our very first competition at the Beyond Jiu Jitsu podcast. You can win a very exclusive, limited edition Beyond Jiu Jitsu rash guard.
Look at you hyping it up, bro.
Oh, yeah. So Adam, through a company called Vantage, a new gi and rash guard jiu-jitsu apparel company, we've partnered up with Vantage and we have created a Beyond Jiu-Jitsu podcast rash guard. So you can get your hands on your very own. Obviously, it's made to order, so it will be size dependent, specifically on your size. So if you want to win this rash guard, well, first of all, if you want to see what it looks like, check our Instagram. It's on Instagram. If you want to win one, this is how you do it. So you get one entry into the competition. If you are following us, you have to be following us on Instagram. That's a given. We will be checking. You have to be following us on Instagram, and you have to leave us a review on your streaming platform of choice, preferably Apple Podcasts, but whatever streaming platform you'd like, leave us a review. I know Spotify does star rating, so chuck us a star rating anyway and a follow because, we love you. But leave us a review. That's how we'll be tracking the entries. And you have to be following us on Instagram. That's at BeyondJujitsu_podcast. And if you want 10 entries into the competition, 10 entries, Adam. Wow.
Oh my Lord.
Wow.
How do I, tell me more, Kieren.
If you want these exclusive 10 entries, then become a Patreon. To do so, you can find our Patreon page. Link is in our Instagram bio. Just go to our Instagram at BeyondJujitsu_podcast and check it out. And for our patrons out there that are already Patreons before this, of course, you get 10 entries. We're not going to leave you out. We're not going to do that to you. So,
and if that all sounds like too much effort, you can just buy one.
Yeah, you can also buy one. You can buy one. But if you want to win one, it's free.
Free stuff's way better. It's like when someone makes you a sandwich and it tastes way better than when you make the sandwich.
Yeah, exactly.
Or whatever. Someone makes you a smoothie and it always tastes better when someone else makes it.
Absolutely. Yeah,
so
totally agree.
If you want a free rashie, that's how you do it. If you want to buy one, you can just send us a message on Instagram or whatever, and we can swing one your way.
And finally, just to wrap up the announcements, and I promise we'll get straight into the meat of this episode, is we have a Q&A episode fast approaching. If for our long-time listeners, you'll know that every 10 episodes we do a Q&A Ask a Black Belt. It's fast approaching, so please get your questions in. We now have audio questions available again. That is in our bio on Instagram. If you go to our link tree, it's the first link. Submit a question via audio format to hear your voice on the Beyond Jiu Jitsu podcast. So, Adam, without further ado, please tell me about the 5 submissions that I should have known as a white belt.
Well, I'm pretty sure I taught them to you.
I don't know.
Go watch this YouTube video, Kieren. Set yourself out. So obviously there's some are going to kind of seem quite obvious and straightforward, but I more importantly want to talk about why I think they're important. And, if you're a higher belt listening and you're already thinking, well, I don't need to know this, I'm a purple belt already. I think it's coming from an instructor's mindset. It's really important to understand why these submissions are important to understand. So the first one, and these aren't in order, right? So I'm not saying like, this is the first submission you should learn. These are just 5 important submissions to learn, right? And so the first one I'm going to put is your trusty straight foot lock.
Nice.
You don't know what that is, do you? I literally can see the blank. So straight foot lock, right? Why do I think that's super important? Because it's probably not necessarily something that you might think is a crucial technique for a white belt. It's definitely not in what you're going to see in your kind of run-of-the-mill beginner's jiu-jitsu course or something like that. But why do I think a straight foot lock is super important? Well, firstly, it's the only leg lock you can do at white belt in terms of standard rules, right? So when you've got your leg locks, you've got your straight foot locks, your toe holds, your knee bars, and your heel hooks, right? And there's, other ones like a steamer locks, but they're all, Z locks, but they're all,
variants of those.
Yeah. So straight foot lock is the only one you can do at white belt in terms of regular rule sets. Okay. So it's the first introduction into understanding how the braking mechanics work of the ankle and the knee. And a straight foot lock on its own, it maybe sort of 8 years ago or whatever, it was written off. No one really did it. It was seen as kind of like, it doesn't really work that well. And then it sort of got more popular with the Kyotera footlock, which is the straight footlock that Kyotera does from De La Riva, which is, I actually have a lot of difficulty doing it. It's quite a hard footlock to lock in, but if you're good at it, like, Mikey Musumeci also does it really well being.
How does it work? What are the mechanics of it? So you're in De La Riva on the bottom.
Yeah. So essentially what you'll find difficult about it if you try to attempt one without being shown how to do it properly is a regular straight foot lock. You've got their foot up under your armpit, obviously, and then your legs are on the other side of their leg, like you're in single X.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
Whereas with De La Riva, their leg, or their shin rather, is on the far side of your hamstring. So it's like, well, how can I have their shin on the far side of my leg? So how can I have my hamstring on their shin, but also have their foot in my armpit? You can see it's like, it can be, if you don't know how to do it, like you have to kind of like crunch into your side to be able to swim your hand through. You don't necessarily.
Is it the same action? I know there's a lot of sweeps from De La Riva. I think there's a tripod sweep from there as well that you showed recently, where you have like that crunching action. Say if I have De La Riva on my left leg.
Well, yeah, you kind of have to do that crunch, right, to get to the position.
Yep.
But then you come back, and the mechanics of how it works, when you like then put that De La Riva hook back in, it massively hyperextends the ankle and the knee.
Right. So you take the hook out, crunch to catch into your armpit, come back to square up with your opponent, and then put the hook back in.
Yeah, and then your other De La Riva leg is like either making an X or pushing their far leg away.
Right.
Kyotera, I mean, it's his footlock, but in jiu-jitsu, people have such like a short memory. All of a sudden, some up-and-coming brown belt does it, and people name it after him. It's like, well, Kyo was doing it a decade ago. Anyway, but it's that first introduction to understanding how legs work. And straight footlocks themselves are super variable. They've got 3 braking mechanics, mainly being hyperextension, rotation, and like rotation like a toe hold. And you can rotate it also in the manner of a heel hook, like an Aoki lock, okay, which is a variation of a straight foot lock. So a straight foot lock in itself is really dynamic and really technical. I think Mikey Musumeci has one of the record for one of the fastest submissions in a black belt final at Worlds with a straight footlock.
Wow.
So, I mean, it's a world championship winning submission. Okay.
I think for for the reason that people would say like it quote doesn't work is when a straight footlock is applied not quite correct, we'll say, but it's enough to be uncomfortable. You can just grit through the pain. You're like, that hurts, but my foot isn't going to break.
Yeah.
However, when it's applied correctly, your foot will break.
Yeah.
And I think that is the distinction, because if you kind of fuck up a rear naked choke, it's just not on, right? It's not really painful. You're doing the submission wrong. It's obvious they're doing it wrong. But if you fuck up a straight footlock, yeah, you can still hurt the person.
Yeah.
You can just grit through it. And I do that regularly.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, when they're done incorrectly, they just kind of, oh, that hurts my shin or something. Oh, I'll tap because I'm in training and it's uncomfortable, but, I wouldn't actually tap. But yeah, it's just when they're done incorrectly. There's lots of positions like that. Another, actually a really common one is when people can't do north-south chokes correctly, which are a very nuanced choke.
Like a ninja choke?
No, like the...
the one with your lat.
That's right. Yeah. Like Marcelo Garcia is the most famous for it.
Right.
It's the one that, God, how many times can I say Mikey Musumeci at the start of this episode? It's the one that, God, what's his name? I forgot. I think it was the Cicero Costa guy submitted Mikey on 2 Who's Number Ones ago with a north-south choke.
Right.
Yeah. And, people end up just neck cranking it. That's not how it works, right? So people will tap in training being like, that sucks, but it was not choking me at all. It's just because I don't know how to do it properly. But yeah, the other reason I think straight footlocks are super important to learn as a white belt is, you just can't deny the evolution of the leg lock game. And let's say you got into jiu-jitsu because you're a Craig Jones fanboy or whatever it is, and you got into jiu-jitsu because of that whole no-gi leg lock game. Well, man, I wouldn't want a white belt going anywhere near, heel hooking me, right? If they didn't even understand like what a straight footlock is. We often take for granted when the higher up you get in jiu-jitsu, not the higher up, but like the more you know, I guess I should say, we take for granted how little beginners know. Like a very obvious one is, sometimes you get a brand new person come in and you're like, oh, when was the last time you did a forward roll? Like when you forward roll like a kid, and they're like, oh God, like 20 years ago, so things that we do and understand, we take for granted that beginners don't. So a straight footlock is a good first introduction into understanding a bit about how the legs work. And that's also just a safety thing. If I've got a white belt who understands a bit about straight footlocks, I'm going to feel safer with them, holding onto my leg than someone who understands nothing. Right?
Absolutely.
They're also just like a boss, like submission. If you get good at them, man, I think I really like straight footlocks.
We have a 4-stripe white belt at the gym who is a smaller guy compared to some of us bigger boys. And he is a weapon at straight footlocks. If you let you let him get your ankle, you are fucked. Nicholas
oh yeah,
has
he does.
mean. He tapped me with his straight footlock fairly recently. It was like 2 weeks ago. I sort of let him. I was playing. We were playing legs, and I was like, oh fuck it, I'll play legs with Nicholas, and I let him get my my foot because I was like, yeah, you know what, I can just stand up. And man, he had it so tight. He ended up going belly down and just cranked it. I was like, fuck.
Yeah, Nicholas is a little weapon, bro. He's so quiet and unassuming.
Yeah.
Does like a really good, he's like really good at the whole like the plata, Barado plata, Takeo plata sort of position as well. Yeah, little quiet, unassuming dude who says nothing, but then like smashes you.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I do want to mention with the straight footlock, particularly that more, would you say traditional entry for single leg X? Would you consider single leg X a traditional entry into straight footlock, perhaps? Or just a variant? A common entry, maybe?
Yeah,
better
common,
wording?
yeah.
So we did have someone at our gym, I'm not going to name names, they hit an awesome single leg X entry in one of their first comps at white belt, they're now a blue belt, into a straight footlock, but they reaped the knee. So you got to be very careful not to let your foot cross that midline.
That's right. Yeah. So again, it's another reason why I think it's a good submission to learn, because it's going to, part of teaching the submission, you're probably also going to be teaching some variant of single leg X or X guard or whatever. And then that's going to go into, again, it depends on the rule set of the competition you're in, but it's going to bleed into explaining reaping and crossing the knee line and all that sort of stuff. So it's just the position itself of a straight footlock single leg X position is just, I think, a crucial position. It's like the evolution of the sport, right? You know, I always say when I'm teaching new people, you get someone who can't even do a forward roll, and then you're having to teach them how to invert. And, you know, you go, okay, well, you know, the sport's grown. I'm not saying inverting's easy, but it's considered basic nowadays, you know? So with the evolution of leg locks and leg entanglements and stuff, you want to be, as a white belt, at least, I'm not saying you need to become a straight footlock master, but understand the position and the mechanics of it.
And the concepts surrounding it. Yeah, absolutely. Before we move on to the next submission, I did want to mention something that I saw on, I think it was Instagram, I read it this morning, and it's to do with straight footlocks. So I believe it was in an MMA match. I think the organization was Cage Warriors, and there was this guy who was going for a omoplata, and the opponent, instead of like trying to fight the omoplata, sat in the omoplata, grabbed their ankle around the back of their neck and pulled down for like a straight footlock that way.
Yeah, so that's like actually considered a toe hold.
Oh, right. There you go.
You can, I don't know. I mean, I've had it done to me when I was a blue belt or whatever, rolling against a black belt. So I'm not sure. I don't know if anyone listening knows. Feel free to correct me, but I don't know if it's ever been like done at a high level.
Yeah,
you know. But I've definitely seen that where you omoplata someone, and then that leg, they kind of leverage it over the back of their own head and they just crank down. Exactly. I think it's definitely a bit of a strongman move, you know, because I can roll with someone like our good friend Joey, who's very strong and mobile, and I can have two hands on a toe hold with him, and it can be very difficult to get the torque needed, you know, because he's very strong at, you know, in all his joints. So to think I'm going to do that with one hand over the back of my head while I'm also in an omoplata, like, I don't know. Like I said, if anyone listening is like, no, I saw that at Worlds, you know, at black belt, feel free to.
Yeah, I want to see it. If you have seen that sub at Worlds.
Yeah, I'm aware of that.
Hit us up. But I just thought it was hilarious because it looked like, I thought it was a video on someone hitting an omoplata, right? And I'm like, oh, this is sick. And then all of a sudden he's tapping. I'm like, what the fuck?
Quite funny.
Hilarious. So what's the second submission?
Second submission is a bit more traditional in the sense that I think a triangle is a very important submission. But for maybe not the reasons that you're thinking, right? So one, because it's kind of that introduction to choking someone with your legs, right? Which again, we take for granted as people who have got jiu-jitsu experience. It's just like, well, yeah, of course you choke people with your legs, but you know,
it's a foreign concept to
it is,
someone
right?
else that doesn't train.
Even using your legs as a weapon is a foreign concept, you know?
Outside of just like kicking.
Like a good way to get through to people about that when they're beginners is you say, when you're trying to explain to them what your guard is, you know, you reference boxing, because even if they haven't done boxing, like they understand the idea of like, you put your hands up in front of your face to guard your face. Your arms are your guard in boxing. It's like, well, in jiu-jitsu, we're on our back, so our legs are our guard. You know, that's what's keeping us safe. So it's that sort of. Why were you?
I was just thinking, I just had a thought that, fuck, man, I'd really rather my legs protecting me than my arms. If you know what I mean?
No doubt.
Like, it's interesting how much
T-Rex arms, they're not going to do shit.
My fat little potato biceps and big ass legs. Yeah, I was just thinking how much
biceps. Look at them.
That shit's leaking. But yeah, you're so right. We take for granted as jiu-jitsu practitioners. We take for granted, like, well, I was just having a quiet little reflection how much my thought process has changed over self-defense over like the last 18 months. Like, yeah, if I'm in that situation, I'd way rather have my legs in front of me than my, you know, just my arms.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's a given, but it's not intuitive.
No, it's not at all.
That's very interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. Yeah. You just made me like think of when you said self-defense. We did way back in the earlier episodes, does jiu-jitsu work for self-defense? My memory was just flooded with all people talking about how crap jiu-jitsu is for self-defense. Yeah. And then I feel like I got
Well,
dumber.
Michael
thinking about it.
Jackson used jiu-jitsu for self-defense recently. Did you see that?
Oh, I saw,
Did you see that?
someone posted
Oh my
it.
God. It's all over the internet at the moment. Like, the Gracies were
Oh
onto
yeah,
it.
The Michael Jackson impersonator.
Yes, Michael Jackson impersonator gets attacked by some crazy drunk man, and he's using jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, so
legit.
good. So good.
If you haven't seen it, just Google it. It's worth a watch. It's hilarious.
Yeah.
And I think one of the great Henzo Gracie did a very funny commentary on it for Gracie Academy, and he leveraged it into an advertisement for Gracie Academy, but it was well done.
Yeah,
normally
right.
I don't like his stuff because it's a bit cringe, but it was pretty funny. So watch that version.
Anyway, back to triangles, right? So you're going to start to learn, a bit more how to use your legs and how to choke with your legs. But kind of more importantly, why I think it's a crucial submission is when we think of a triangle choke, we obviously think of the standard one with your legs, but the mechanics of a triangle choke are the same for a triangle with your legs, an arm triangle, a Darce choke, an anaconda choke, right? These are all the same mechanics in terms of what forces the person to tap, okay? And if anyone doesn't know, all types of triangle chokes work by having one of your body parts cutting off one side of their neck, so one carotid artery, and your opponent's own shoulder being pushed into their neck to block off the other carotid artery. So a regular triangle choke with your legs, it's your leg, right? Or the combination of all your legs and your abs and everything. But like your hamstring is typically going across one carotid artery, their own shoulder is on the other side. A Darce choke, it's their own shoulder and your bicep and forearm. Anaconda is similar, but just the other way around. An arm triangle, same thing. It's with my arm, so their own shoulder getting pushed into their neck and my bicep on the other side of their neck. So it's not even so much about the triangle choke itself with your legs, but it's also just, if it's taught properly, understanding the mechanics of how a triangle choke works that's going to trickle down into then when you're learning how to do a Darce choke or an arm triangle or an anaconda, right? So it's super important to understand how triangle chokes work, okay? When you're teaching one with the legs, I always say, like beginners are taught like, oh, it's either both arms in or both arms out, because getting stuck in triangles it's almost like a rite of passage for beginners.
Yep.
Okay. It happens
Yep.
all the time.
So easy.
Some people break the habit quicker than others. Also depends what kind of style of passing they lean towards.
But it's understandable, particularly when if you have like a first or second time person training jiu-jitsu in your closed guard, and what they want to do is naturally put their arms out. Triangle City. Easy.
Yeah. So, you're often taught like, oh, if there's one arm in, one arm out, you'll get triangled. We know that's not the case because you got passes like over under passes and whatever, where it's one arm in, one arm out.
Yeah.
But, when people are doing a triangle with their legs, I always say to them, you want their arm and their head. Right? You don't want their shoulder. It's not their arm, shoulder, and head. It's their arm and their head. If you have their arm, shoulder, and head, like their shoulders inside the triangle choke, that means it's not being pushed into their neck, right? So you don't want the shoulder. You want that's why often when beginners will get caught in a triangle choke, they'll try pull themselves out and they'll actually just pull their own shoulder out, making it tighter.
Yeah, you want to drive into it if anything.
Typically, like it's a bit more dynamic than that. But typically it's a bit counterintuitive. You want to push yourself further into the triangle to get out of it. So I believe it's a really important technique to understand because, if we're talking a traditional triangle from closed guard, you're starting to learn the concept of choking with your legs, but also the mechanics of a triangle is going to then help you better apply all the other variations of triangle chokes.
And obviously, I suppose it goes without saying, but I'm going to say it anyway, understanding those mechanics and the submission itself will help you understand how to defend when you are in a triangle. Because just thinking to whenever I'm defending from a triangle, if I have my shoulder, if they don't if they haven't isolated my arm, i.e. my shoulder is in the choke, then I know I'm not going to get submitted.
Yeah.
Like they just can't submit me. So then I'm able to, with that knowledge, even though it's, pressure on my neck, I'm uncomfortable, I may have restricted breathing, I can still breathe.
Yeah.
It's not cutting off the blood to my brain, and I'm able to fight out that submission. I can sit there all day, really.
So I've seen you sit all day in triangles.
Now. At least I get out. But I haven't been triangled in a long time. Ever since, and now this, you're probably going to put me in a triangle the first time we roll now that I've said that, because that's
the first thing that went through my mind.
Generally what you do. Anytime I say something like that, you're like, oh, we'll see. But with someone, purple belt and under, I haven't, ever since I was absolutely smashed in a triangle in one of my comps, I think my third ever comp. It's on YouTube if you want to see me in a fucking long ass triangle. I was in a triangle for like nearly 2 minutes, and man, it just rocked me. Ever since then, I went on like a personal, journey, almost like a truth journey, to not be submitted by triangles. So particularly my passing style, over under, it used to happen a lot. Yeah, it still happens. I get put in them, but fuck, man, good luck finishing it. I'm going to make you like really fight for it.
Yeah.
And I think another key concept obviously is not letting your arm cross their body. Like, don't let your arm cross their center line, because that's,
it's going to make it rough. Like that's one of the things that helps push the shoulder into the neck.
Exactly. So it's like, if you have a triangle in someone and you're unable to isolate that shoulder, if you're listening to this and you're like, fuck, how do I do it? A good tip there is if you bridge up, as in hip up, and then slide their arm across, that will help you get your foot that's behind their neck more parallel more perpendicular to them, and isolate the shoulder.
Look at you go.
Boom.
Look at you teaching
Mate,
triangles,
I'm a blue belt.
bro.
I'm allowed to.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm allowed to talk now. I'm allowed to say shit.
All right, next one is, so we've done straight foot locks, triangles. Next one, again, a bit more, the rest of these on the list are a bit more what you would expect. So is just your armbar, right? Why is an armbar important to learn? Well, it's just important. It helps you in understanding leverage, essentially. And I should have actually said this before triangle, because it connects a bit better to the whole straight footlock / leg entanglement aspect. Is, the leg mechanics are very similar to the arm mechanics. Like the way the elbow works is very similar to the way the knee works, right? And when you learn an armbar correctly, you learn about having to control the wrist or the thumb, if you will, because the orientation of the wrist dictates which way the elbow bends and doesn't bend. And so it's the same with legs and your foot in relation to your knee. The direction that your foot is pointing indicates which direction your knee bends, right? Like your knee always bends with your heel towards your butt. It never bends with your heel towards, your groin. Okay. Or towards your belly or whatever. Yeah. Right. And so it's it's very similar with the arm and the orientation of the thumb. So understanding an armbar, more importantly, you're learning, it's a very, very great way to start to understand leverage, right, in jiu-jitsu. But it's also going to, like, even blue, purple belts, I find it mind-boggling that sometimes I have to explain to them that, like, oh man, like if the thumb's pointing that way, the elbow bends that way. Like, how don't you know that, right? Like, give me that purple belt back. So it's really important to understand leverage and, the braking mechanics of an armbar. Understanding that is going to translate to then when you are getting a bit more experienced and learning, whatever, heel hooks, toe holds, knee bars, that's going to translate to understanding the braking mechanics of the leg as well. They're very, very similar in the way that they work. So not only is it just a great submission anyway, and a very obvious submission, typically one of the first submissions that white belts learn. So I think it's no surprise to anyone. But the reason I think it's important is to understand the braking mechanics of the joint and the orientation between the wrist, or if it's the leg, the orientation between the foot and the knee. Because I always have to explain that to people all the time, and that's why, one of the not flashier, but one of the coolest armbar escapes is the hitchhiker escape. You know, it is a great armbar escape. It looks super cool. But the problem with a hitchhiker escape is it requires your opponent to not really have control of your wrist or your thumb. I keep saying thumb. It's important to note if you're not aware, you're not allowed to grab the thumb, right? You're not allowed to grab
the thumb. It's like the digit.
Yeah. But like I'm talking about the thumb as in
thumb.
If you gave someone a bro handshake, that's kind of how you're going to hold their hand, right? So you're actually grabbing the palm part of the thumb.
Yeah, the meat,
right?
The meat of it.
Yeah. So
and just for those that maybe are unfamiliar or having a brain fart in terms of a hitchhiker escape is if you're in a fully extended armbar, you rotate your thumb up as though you're hitchhiking. That's hence the name. And you almost do like a Homer Simpson like whoop run.
Yeah. And you like walk around and you end up going from belly up to belly down.
Yeah. It is effective. It needs to be done very quickly, and you need to be prepared to tap halfway if they catch it.
That's right. Yeah, because you can get halfway through a hitchhiker escape and they like clamp down on the meaty part of your thumb,
and they take you over the other side.
So your wrist no longer rotates, and they understand that or even if your wrist rotates, they understand that, okay, well now I'm no longer pulling their arm down, I'm pulling their arm to the right because that's the way the elbow doesn't bend.
Yep.
And you can get caught out halfway through. So it's a great escape, but it relies on either your opponent not having control of your thumb or not knowing that's, not knowing how the mechanics of an elbow works, right? Because again, it's one of those things that the more you know about jiu-jitsu, we take for granted that, of course it doesn't bend that way. Of course it does bend that way. But you forget that people don't know this intuitively. Maybe if they come from, some type of medical or physio background or even a personal trainer, right? They might have a bit more understanding. But the average person doesn't really understand which way it bends,
And depending on the orientation of your thumb. And I mean, everyone knows that their fucking elbow doesn't hyperextend the wrong way. But what we're trying to say is, in the heat of the moment, applied technique isn't intuitive as you would think it is.
Yeah,
you understand mechanics because you are a human and you have those mechanics. But when you're, trying to manipulate those mechanics of someone else to your advantage, it isn't as intuitive as it would be to someone that's been training for a while.
That's right. On to the next one. Arm bars is pretty obvious. Number 4 is two techniques, essentially just Kimuras and Americanas, right? Again,
first submission I ever learned, Americana.
Yeah, strongman move.
Oh,
no, they're fine submission.
Hey, my first comp, I got like 4 Americanas.
Look at you go.
No,
they're fine. Like Americanas get written off all the time because people go, oh, they're a big strongman move. Oh, you don't see them at the Worlds, blah blah blah. And it's like,
but bro, you ain't at the Worlds.
Yeah, there's that. But it's also because sometimes you teach a technique or you learn a technique and it's it's learning the technique. How do I explain this? You learn it so you never have to do it kind of thing. So let's say Americanas, if all of a sudden you could click your fingers and everyone forgot they existed, you could start hitting them, right? Because people would be putting their arms in places that, but because people know Americanas exist, right? They're to some degree quite easy to defend, but so you have to learn it so you know how to defend it. But then it's the act of defending an Americana, for example, like the obvious one is an Americana from mount. You go for it, they defend it, you armbar them, right? I mean, it's
the opposite
that
arm.
The other arm,
or even take their back.
Right, yeah. So it's the act of learning the technique that almost to some degree makes it irrelevant. Sometimes you teach a technique or you learn a technique and you're like, okay, we're doing this, but this only works if your opponent makes this stupid mistake, right? They're never going to make this mistake. Why? Because they've learned this technique, So sometimes you need to learn a technique, but really you're learning what not to do because you're never actually going to hit that armbar. Like, let's say, another classic one that you teach beginners is, I'm mounted on someone and they try push me off. They push on my chest.
Yeah.
I armbar them.
Mm.
Do you ever see that really like happen at an elite level? No, because they've learned if you push someone from Mount Bottom, if you try bench press them off, they're going to armbar you.
Yeah.
Right. So Americanas, like for anyone who's riding them off, put it in that category and be less salty about it.
Mm.
But more importantly, why Americanas and Kimuras are crucial for beginners to learn is that you've probably noticed the theme I'm going along are more, I've picked submissions that it's important to understand conceptually and mechanically how they work. And Kimuras and Americanas are a great tool for you to understand the application of torque in jiu-jitsu, right? It's, compared to something like an armbar, or straight footlock has torque, but it's, quite nuanced if we're looking at a basic straight footlock, or even a triangle, like we're really just applying like very linear leverage, whereas a Kimura, an Americana is all about rotation. And I keep making the link between upper body and lower body. If we start applying a heel hook or a toe hold, there's a lot of rotation in that, right? So you're starting to understand how to apply torque into a joint, right? Because getting the submission is all about taking your opponent's body to the breaking point where they give up, and when it's on a limb, it's typically, manipulating the joint. Okay. You do have the odd, I was going to say you do have like bicep crush or calf crush, but even those, they're actually the joint if you understand mechanically how they work. So if we ignore chokes, right, when we're attacking the limbs, it's always the joint, and the shoulder is not typically a joint that you lever open to get someone to tap. There are positions. There's, one you can do when you're on top in someone's deep half guard, right? Nicholas Marigali does it. But, and then if they don't tap, transitions to an inverted triangle on their back.
Okay.
Anyway, typically it's a rotation. Okay. So
it makes sense because if you imagine an elbow joint, you basically have two sticks connected together and they lever at that joint.
Yeah.
Whereas a shoulder is a ball and socket. So it has way more range of motion than your elbow, obviously. So in order to manipulate a ball and socket, you need to take it to the end range of that ball and socket and then past.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
Again, not intuitive when you're, coming off the street.
Well, if you get someone who doesn't train jiu-jitsu and you show them a Kimura or Americana, like you don't demonstrate it on them, you just show it to them, they probably think you're attacking the person's elbow, right? Like they probably don't even realize that it's actually the shoulder that's going there, right? And, it doesn't only translate to toe holds and heel hooks, but a Kimura is the exact same mechanics as an omoplata, right? Which omoplatas are a very small jump from a triangle to an omoplata in terms of positionally how you get there. Okay, so understanding torque and rotational submissions is very important to add to your tool set. And the plus side is if you're a big strong man like you can go into a tournament and get 4 Americanas.
Yeah, and some of them I didn't even isolate. So from Mount, right? One of the story time from Mount.
Here we go. Let's take a deep dive into Kieren's shithouse Americanas.
Yeah, dude. It was fucking dog shit. It's on my YouTube. Check it out. So I think this was my first ever competition. First time on the mats ever. In a competition setting, and I hit this Americana, right? So let me just paint the picture. So what I'd been doing in the gym is a setup where you go for a mount, you go for a heavy crossface, right? So, that's one thing he told me is just consolidate your position, always heavy crossface. So in mount, my arm was behind their head and I was going for the crossface, and then you grab the Americana grip. So gripping on their wrist. Then you connect the Americana. You're meant to get rid of their head and then take I didn't even get rid of their head. I just fucking cranked it, son.
Yeah, look, I mean, it's possible.
It's definitely possible.
Well, yeah, obviously. I mean,
it's dumb. It's shit house.
Well, yeah, like, I always try to teach things that I say to my students, unless I'm teaching a technique where it's like, oh, you're learning this, so you're learning what not to do.
Yeah.
Like I just mentioned, I always try to say to my students, not teaching you something that goes, oh, this will work on a white belt or a blue belt, then don't show me. Like I want to know stuff that works.
That works.
On black belts. Okay. And an Americana from mount with their head, it shouldn't work. And the reason for it is the shoulder's not as isolated from the body because you're keeping the head and the shoulder inside the same closed circuit, right? Which is your key lock Americana grip. And secondly, it also it stops you from keeping their arm out sort of 90 degrees from their shoulder. So the fact that brings it closer in, the rotation ends up being like up above their shoulder opposed to out to the side of their shoulder.
Yeah, the range of motion I had to go through, like he should have tapped. Oh, so long. Like I was, face to the mat. Like it was just excitement. White belt on white belt, and I was just fucking cranking.
I mean, but it can work, right? Like sometimes, depending what you're teaching, you often do have to teach something that won't work on a black belt. And what I mean by that is, it won't work on a black belt because when you do, said move, they're going to do this, but then you're going to do this, and then you're going to do this, and then that's the chess game. But you kind of have to first learn that I'm going to do this.
So then it's their response, right? And it's like you were saying with the armbar. If I got an Americana on a black belt, they're going to turn to their side to defend it. Like if I had it really tight. But if I know they're going to turn to their side to defend it, maybe I attack the Americana to then get the armbar, or attack the Americana to force them into turning onto their side. They think I'm going for the armbar, but then I take their back. And that's like, three steps ahead.
I can't even remember the last time I was Americana day. But it's because of knowing that it exists and knowing that, hey, if I don't do this, I will be Americana, Anyway, Kimura's Americana, and Kimura's, right? They're definitely way more effective and applicable. Like I said, it's the same rotational torque as an plata, but then you've got the whole like Kimura trap system, and they're just much more applicable.
Oh yeah.
The last one, again, very obvious, and that's your rear naked choke.
My favorite.
Right? Yeah, it's rear naked choke is just a cookie cutter submission. It's not necessarily offering anything that like a triangle choke doesn't in terms of what forces the person to tap or pass out, but it's just an important choke to understand, the power of being behind someone. Like, it's way easier for me to teach you that submission on someone's back than me going like, okay, I'm going to teach you how to do an armbar from the back or a triangle from the back, right? Yeah. I'm going to teach you a rear naked choke. So again, you're going to have that opportunity to learn about blocking off the carotid arteries. It's going to give you that, start to get your feet wet in the idea of, wow, look how powerful it is to be on someone's back, to be behind someone, right? So rear naked chokes are just a classic choke that I don't think a lot needs to be said about rear naked chokes. Every person needs to know it. Every white belt should know a rear naked choke.
Most people understand the rear naked choke before they come to jiu-jitsu.
Most people, if someone has
ever watched MMA, like you understand a rear naked choke, sort of. But then you find there's a key difference between someone who trains to apply a rear naked choke and someone who saw it on MMA or does it wrestling with their brother or their friends or whatever.
Yeah.
And the key there, and this is one of the biggest like light bulb mind blown moments, is because I've been doing rear naked chokes for years, like ever since I was a kid, wrestling and shit. Because like I said, everyone sort of conceptually understands it.
Yeah.
Is that when people are doing it that aren't trained, they almost make like a right angle with their arms. So it's like, arm around the throat, right angle, hand on bicep, and then they close like a right angle. Whereas when you are trained, that is not the hand position at all, the arm position at all. It's more like an acute acute angle, right? Yeah. So you're going to slide your hand behind the head, not that fucking big arcing fucking bullshit that I did. You slide it.
But I think, like you said, it's if someone is interested enough in jiu-jitsu that they've walked in the door, they would have seen a rear naked choke. Like, they won't necessarily know how to do it, but it's just such a and it's also such a beginner basic choke that, man, it is just it is just so fundamentally proven, you know, like it works at every single belt, at every of the top 1% most elite grapplers in the world. Rear naked chokes still work, right? Like I don't think you can fault them. You know, every position has its pros and cons, but you could argue that some submissions get like slightly more difficult to apply on higher belts or whatever. Like, but rear naked chokes they're almost faultless. They're just such a good choke.
If a white belt had a sunken in rear naked choke on a black belt,
I see where we're going.
would they be able to finish it, Adam?
Yeah. So like what Kieren's alluding to is trying to drive traffic to his YouTube channel. No, Kieren and I did a little video about like what it takes to tap a black belt, and you were still a white belt at the time, right? Like a 4-stripe white belt or whatever. And it pretty much, we did some like silly stuff where I had my hands tied to my feet and stuff. It was quite fun, but it more or less got to you not just starting on my back, but starting on my back in a rear naked choke.
Yeah.
And man, like you don't have to know a lot about how to do a rear naked choke for that to be unescapable, even as a black belt. I watched, you know, maybe a month ago, I don't know, just one of those random videos that came up on my YouTube or something. And it was Frank Mir talking about escaping rear naked chokes. And if you don't know who Frank Mir is, very successful jiu-jitsu black belt, but more famously known for being a UFC heavyweight world champion back in the early, not super early as in Ken Shamrock days.
It was kind of like
he was around when like
GSP sort of
GSP
era,
and BJ Penn was big.
Yeah,
and,
Anderson Silva's early days, like around 2017,
Randy Couture was still
2017. I don't know, whatever.
Nah,
maybe earlier.
Nah, way before that, bro. Like I don't know, like 20.
He's like 2014,
or
isn't he?
Something.
Trying to like, I'm trying to like. Anyway, fuck it.
Anyway, yeah, he's a beast. And yeah, he was talking about it and he was like, oh, at this point you'll do this point you'll do this. And yeah, and someone asked him like, and what do you do when it's essentially like fully locked in? He's like, man, like what can you do?
You go to sleep.
Yeah,
that's what you do. Like,
you know, if it's fully locked in as in your chin's not tucked or like, you know, it's not across your face at all. It's like, dude,
straight under the neck and it's locked in.
Yeah, you're done. You know, yeah, you're going to reach back and try to peel. For those who don't know, when the theory of defending a rear naked choke when it's locked in is that you don't actually pull on the arm that's around your neck, because that arm that's around your neck is reinforced and locked in place by the other arm that's behind your head. So the theory is that you pry that arm off behind your head so that like undoes the padlock, if you will, and then you can pull the arm off from around your neck. But anyone listening has trained, well, everyone listening pretty much, I would argue, has trained jiu-jitsu. You know it's not as simple as that. If it's done correctly, that hand behind the head is protected by your face and your chin. And even if it's not, you know, it's hard for you to pry that off while you're still getting choked. And then even if you can pry it off, you can do one-armed rear naked chokes, you know, so it's not as simple as that, right? So it's just a fundamental choke that works at all levels and everyone needs to know it.
I think what I'm sort of from a self-defense perspective, and this was actually in a MMA fight recently. It was in the UFC where a chick had a deep rear naked choke on another chick and she reached back and like tried to eye gouge intentionally. Like
really?
Yeah, it was so bad. Like, you know, there was uproar in the community. I'm not sure what penalties she received. If someone knows, let me know. But yeah, it was really, really bad. So I'm just thinking in a self-defense situation, if you had a rear naked choke on someone and they reach back and they go for your eyes, I think the only way you could really defend that is to really fucking bury your face. So
bury your face and brunt it for 5 seconds and then they're
like,
going to pass out.
Yeah, like drive your face into your hand. So when you're using your face to protect that reinforcing arm and that reinforcing hand, if you just drive that in so you only have maybe your forehead or like part of your face, it would be hard for them to really get your eye.
Unless they had a weapon on them, like unless they had a knife in their hand, you know, whatever damage they can do, you're just going to cop it and they'll pass out.
Yeah.
If they had a knife, they could, stab you in the leg or something while you're choking them.
But even then, I'd keep choking.
Well, you would.
Mm.
But, you're just going to brunt whatever it is. Look, if someone had a knife, I'm not going to want to go anywhere near with them. I ain't messing
How long
with
would
knives.
if someone had a really deep rear naked choke and they were strong, like
How long to pass out?
yeah, how long?
Oh, man, 4 to 6 seconds.
Yeah, I was thinking 10 max.
Oh, bro, 10 seconds.
It's a long
it's
time,
got to
eh?
not be on properly.
Yeah.
Like,
That's a good point.
or like it could be on properly, but I'm squeezing on Brock Lesnar's neck and, it's taken a little longer because he's just like trying to pull down that arm from around his neck.
So if they couldn't use their hands for whatever reason, or they were using them completely ineffectively, you had a deep rear naked choke because you're cutting off the blood.
5-6 seconds.
Yeah, you're out pretty quick, eh?
Yeah,
Pretty fucking powerful.
Yeah, dude. Like, I mean, look at the little video we did, and we started the roll in it.
Yeah.
I reckon maybe 1.5 seconds, and I tapped.
Yeah.
Not because I was like a millisecond from going out, but it was just like it was so deep, so tight. Like,
this is not happening.
I mean, maybe I could have held out for one more second.
Mm. That's kind of like starting with your arm already hyperextended in an armbar. Like that's the equivalent in a
kind
choke.
of, yeah, it is. Like the difference being is that in a fully extended armbar, it's easier to escape than a locked in rear naked choke because if things go wrong, like you don't pass out. Right? I'm not saying getting your arm broken is a good thing, but
you can keep fighting.
You could hypothetically keep fighting. Very famous, Jacare versus Hodge Gracie, but also like because it's not isolated part of your body. What I mean by that is, your neck or your 2 carotid arteries that run through the sides of your neck, it doesn't matter what your shoulder's doing, what your hips are doing, what anything else is doing. It doesn't affect like what's happening with your carotid arteries. Whereas if I'm in a fully extended armbar, but I rotate my hips, that'll rotate my shoulder a bit, and that can hopefully rotate my elbow and then my thumb. And then, so you have on paper more ability to manipulate your own joint that is being attacked. Whereas you don't with your carotid arteries.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, short of shrugging your shoulders and tucking your chin, there's no way that you can move your carotid arteries.
And if you do tuck your chin and they catch the choke around your chin and they keep squeezing and you're like, oh, this guy's squeezing my jaw. Well, move your fucking jaw, bro.
Yeah, bro.
I hate that, eh?
It's like putting your face in the way of the choke. Like, it might buy you some time, but if they squeeze across it, that's your own problem.
Man,
it's like defending an uppercut with your face.
Yeah.
It's like
stupid.
Yeah.
Like, I used to have a real problem with like, oh, I'm not going to squeeze. And then it took, you saying it like 50 times and then I'm like, nah, fuck it. So if I catch a rear naked choke around someone's face, so long as it's below the eyebrow.
Nicky Rod, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'll give him a little bit of time. Like in a comp, I wouldn't, but in the gym, I'm gonna slowly apply the squeeze
I'm not
to
just
be
gonna
like
crank
essentially me saying, lift your chin.
Yeah. And then if I'm like full squeeze and they still haven't lifted, I'm just gonna keep on going.
Yeah, that's
Till
right.
my arms gas.
Yeah. So like 5 seconds.
Ooh. They're pretty big, man.
All right.
Yeah.
So just to summarize, the 5 submissions you all need to know regardless of your belt, but if you're a white belt wondering what submissions, you should learn. Your straight foot lock, so you can start understanding the legs a little bit. Your triangle, so you understand the mechanics of a triangle and what it means to choke someone with your legs. Your arm bar, so you understand leverage and joint orientation. Kimuras/Americanas, so you understand the application of torque. And rear naked choke, because I said so. You've just got to know a rear naked choke. What you'll notice as well about all these submissions except the rear naked choke, because it's very specific to being on someone's back, your straight footlock, triangle, armbar, Kimura, they can all be done whether you're on the top or on the bottom, right? So, you could almost double them. You're getting 8 submissions, if you will. Every single one of those submissions you can apply from the top or from the bottom, right? Sometimes people go, oh, I need a submission from closed guard, or like I need one from mount. Well, triangle I can do from closed guard and mount. Same with armbar, same with Kimura. Like all 3 of those submissions work closed guard and mount. All 3 of those submissions work close guard, and side control, right? So, you're getting a lot more than just 5 submissions.
Absolutely. And if you want to get into the detailed nuances of locks versus chokes, we've covered that on episode number 42. So for those that
How did you know that off the top? You 100%. Pre-read that.
Yeah, it's right there. Hashtag 042, chokes versus locks.
Yeah, let me just bring that up on my laptop.
Adam doesn't have a laptop.
I forgot my laptop.
Yeah, so if you do want a bit more of if you want to satisfy more of your Beyond Jiu-Jitsu itch, then check out episode number 42, chokes versus locks, not chocks, chokes versus locks, or chocks.
Or if you've just got an itch, there's a good chance it's ringworm. So
yeah, sort that shit out. Yeah.
All right, guys, thank you so much for listening. I think regardless of your belt, you can improve those 5 submissions and positions a lot. Going back to the first one, straight foot locks, I love them. Turn it into an Aoki lock. If you don't know what that is,
Google it.
Pretty much a heel hook, but disguised as a straight foot lock.
It's epic.
Yeah. So you can learn a lot there, guys. If you want some more, we've got our Instagram at @BeyondJujitsu_podcast. We have our Patreon page. And if you skipped over the first part of the episode, but now you're here at the end, you can win yourself the new Beyond Jiu-Jitsu podcast rash guard. The details of how to enter, they'll be on our Instagram page. But what you need to do is follow us on Instagram and leave us a review on your listening platform of choice. If that's too much effort, just buy one. Until next time.
See ya.